But now, before we had listened to our keynote speaker, we're going to listen to one of his constituents, a former resident of Minnesota, who is still a member of LEA, still doing his part to try to make others see the light. Who's now a constituent of Representative Knudsen, now living in Wisconsin. This is now to introduce Representative Knudsen. Let's hear a nice hand for Tom Coulter.
Thanks, John. We're not going to spend too much time on this because Dean is going to have to drive back to Madison tonight. Over the next 2 weeks, Wisconsin will probably be passing a right-to-work law, and you'll be reading about that in the newspaper. The Senate gets it this week, the House gets it next week. At any rate, and the other things you've read about Wisconsin, the Minneapolis-St. Paul media is very kind to Wisconsin, I'm sure you've noticed. And so you've heard about all the damage to the Capitol and, of course, the tussle with the teachers' union. But there's been a lot more going on in Wisconsin. And I've discovered lots more as I learn more. And I will tell you this, Walker might end up as the next president, and but there's a really deep bench. The lieutenant governor is a very capable person too, and she didn't get chosen to balance that ticket. The other thing is there's a very deep bench, stronger after this past election, of constitutional conservatives in both houses of the legislature in Wisconsin. So there's really, Wisconsin is really a bright, shining star of hope for a lot of things, and it's much more affordable than Minnesota. So I'm going to introduce Dean up here. He's been chair, mayor, or president of every right-leaning direction organization in Hudson. Long experience, and he's been active since he was a pup. So too many to talk about. So here, Dean.
Well, thanks, Tom. I know it is quite an honor to be asked to be here, and I've enjoyed getting to talk and meet with you. I'm pretty sure that Mr. Augustine really wanted Scott Walker to be here tonight, but he wasn't willing.
I wanted you here.
He wasn't willing to move the whole event down to Clear Lake, Iowa, to the Best Western. Otherwise, that would have been very possible if he'd been willing. It's exciting. To be in a room full of people that are conservatives, and you're all there either at the grassroots level or in elected office, and you're working to fight for core principles that I know we all believe in. And limited government has always been a core principle of mine. It shows in many ways, but I first got involved in politics because of that when I was a young person. And so here, we don't have anything like the LEA in Wisconsin. There's no other similar group. And so it's a great honor to be here with the people that are standing up and fighting for limited government, for free enterprise, and for our Constitution. And so for all the honorees, I'd say congratulations, we're proud of you, and good job, and keep it up. We fight for freedom in a lot of different ways. When you think about what has gone on in our two states have lots in common, probably more in common than what separates us or differentiates us. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but it's a lot more than a common border, I can tell you that. We have this long progressive heritage where all sorts of ideas that you now know as sort of mainstream, they came out of Wisconsin. And in the last few years, things have really taken a different turn in Wisconsin. Part of it came in 2010, and I'll talk with you a little bit about that. Once upon a time, back in the 1800s, we were all part of Wisconsin territory. And at that time, 1842, in the Wisconsin Territorial Legislature, one representative accused the other during floor debate of being a liar. And afterwards, the accused came to confront Representative Arndt, who didn't back down at all and ultimately took a swing, at which time the other representative pulled his pistol, point blank, shot him in the heart, killed him. We still have this. The vest he was wearing with the hole in it is in a museum across the street from the legislature. And you might think, boy, how could things get to that point? Well, let me tell you a story that's a little bit closer than 170 some years ago. And that was 4 years ago this week. 4 years ago this week, on the assembly floor, we'd been in debate and the speaker called the vote that the question before the body is AB 11, all in favor. And the place erupted in a way that you really wouldn't believe. Now, during that debate, we had already heard death threats from the other side, from my liberal colleagues across the aisle, death threats on the floor, yelled, cursing, swearing, but when this vote was finally called, the place erupted. They charged across the aisle at us. Some people, you know, you see people charging at you. So in the end, a lot of people didn't vote, but that vote was taken, and that was the vote on Act 10, and it changed everything in Wisconsin. I mean, it was really a key moment in time that was a culmination of a number of things, and I'm just going to tell you my story a little bit and how we got to that point. When I was back in high school, I read a book written by Milton Friedman. It was called Free to Choose, and I think it was a formational thing for me. And if you haven't read that book, I mean, you really should read that book. I came into Wisconsin after having lived in North Dakota, South Dakota. I went to veterinary school in Iowa, and then I moved to Florida for a while, and I came to Hudson, Wisconsin. Now, Hudson, Wisconsin, I'll tell you, it's interesting, because in our legislature, it's a little bit smaller. We got half as many senators. We got about a third less in the House. And so there are only 132 of us all together, right? Okay, 8 of those can drive to the Capitol in 20 minutes. I'm one of them. Except the Capitol I can drive to from my home in 20 minutes is your Capitol. And when I tell people that down in Madison, they just cannot believe this. They say, well, wait a minute now, you mean you do? So you're really close to the Twin Cities. I'm in the Twin Cities. And I looked at the map of where all your honorees are from tonight. I live closer to your capital than any one of them. Bob's the closest in Forest Lake, and Google Maps says he can't drive here in 20 minutes, but I can. And so I'm actually the closest of all these honorees. And I live and breathe the Twin Cities media market. So all the things that you go through, I go through them too. My constituents also all are in that same Twin Cities media market, every one of them. Not a one of my constituents can get any Wisconsin TV, not a one. And a lot of them can't get a Wisconsin newspaper. They read the Pioneer Press, just like, you know, or the Red Star, whatever it is. And so we've got a lot in common. Now we have different governors. Your governor, he occasionally picks on us and picks a fight. He did that about a week ago when he said that, you know, these tourism ads were idiotic. I don't know the man very well, probably not as well as you do, but to me it seemed him calling something idiotic was probably pot calling the kettle black or something there. I'm not sure, but anyway, I'm here in peace and friendship. I would have taken a cue from John Kerry and brought someone along to sing to you, but you know, James Taylor wasn't available tonight, so you've just got me. I'm your friend, and we have a lot in common, and I'm here to tell you kind of my message of hope and optimism for you that believe in conservative government and limiting government, is that things can change, and you saw the beginning of it right now. You elected some new people, and you took control. And what happened for me was I was a grassroots activist for a lot of years. That's what I did. I was involved in party politics and a party officer before I ever ran for an elected office. Then I served on the city council, and we lowered taxes. And then I went 3 terms, and I went back, and then I was involved in this sort of grassroots movement that didn't really have a name, although now I represent Pierce County, part of Pierce County. And there was actually a Pierce County Tea Party long before the Tea Party movement erupted. I know some of you here are involved in Tea Party movements. We had a number of groups like that in Wisconsin that were really involved. And really, Scott Walker got his start because of a group in Milwaukee that was just like your grassroots group here. And that helped him get elected to county executive, and that's where he came from. But my story was a little bit different. And, you know, when the Tea Party movement started, I'd already been marching and protesting. I was here in 2007. I both was at the Jason Lewis tax cut rally. Anybody else there? 2007. Then later, that same year, I was at a rally outside the Capitol in Madison. I had never been inside the Capitol in Madison. I was marching around carrying my sign, which I still have at home, that says no more tax cuts on one side and keep your hands off my wallet on the other side, and I still have that sign. And that was 2007, and you know, Wisconsin got to a point, we had all liberal government. There was total control, just like you had just a year ago. And in 2010, something very unusual happened in Wisconsin, is that the electorate was just fed up. They were ready for a change. And at the same time, there were a whole bunch of people that kind of came and stood up and said, I'm willing to do this. I've had enough and I'm willing to run for office. And so we had a very unusual group. We had 5 CPAs that ran for the assembly. 5. They all won. We had a doctor that ran, district to the north of me. I'm a veterinarian, I ran. We elected a whole group of people, and you know, we came with kind of a different mindset, and that was that I don't care how long I'm here, we are gonna change things while we're here, right now. We're not gonna hear anything about this isn't the right time for this. We're gonna do it right now. Now, we were fortunate. We took control, and we got a governor who felt the same way. And so that's what happened. In February of 2011, Governor Walker came to us and he said, we're going to take on a very big challenge. And that was on February 11th. He first told our caucus. You guys had caucus tonight. He went to the senators first. They didn't applaud or do anything. They were like stunned silence. Then he came to our separate group and he told us, in the assembly, we stood and applauded with a standing ovation. We could not wait to get going with this, but we really didn't know what we were in store for. Because within about 2 days, the protest started, and the first day there were about 10,000. The day after that, there's 25,000. Now, I don't know if you can picture this, but like that tax cut rally we were at that time, that was about 5,000. So now you got 25,000. And then the next day, there was about 30 to 40, and it was the weekend. And everything changed. It all got national attention. All of a sudden, the whole world was really watching what was happening there. And the pressure on us was pretty incredible. So we had death threats. We had people that would follow us around. It's hard to describe. I had the windows broken out of my car before this was all over. People had nails strewn on their driveway. We had protesters outside our houses. We had my house vandalized, and others. But as this thing unfolded, what happened was 2 things. You saw Governor Walker's resolve was only strengthened by the way that they reacted. We knew we were onto something. And we had tackled the most powerful special interest group there is in our state. It isn't any longer, but it was. And I'm pretty sure you all know what is the most powerful special interest group. I mean, I heard Representative Detmer talk about his 34 years of education experience, but there is no way that that powerful interest group would ever endorse him. And you have to stop and ask yourself, how did we get to that point? That they not only control education, and they control such a big chunk of the money that's being taken from our taxpayers, but they won't endorse or support someone that knows so much about education. Well, I tell you what, things are a lot different for us now, because we won that battle. It took a long time, and ultimately what it took was we had to vote for it twice in the assembly. The story that I told you about that eruption, when we finally came to the point of voting on that, and we don't really have a procedure for ending debate in the assembly. We have a long tradition that you will debate until you debate. So we started on Tuesday, and we come into session at 11, and we started debating this right away. And, you know, on Wednesday at 11, it had been 24 hours. And you're tired after 24 hours going straight, right? And on Thursday at 11 o'clock, it had been 48 hours. And now you're really tired, but there's also a lot of adrenaline because the scene outside was pandemonium. We had about 100,000 people. And we have a big square there. Our Capitol's right in the middle of the big square. And the Capitol at this point had been completely taken over. So the previous governor had a concern for the homeless, that he had started to let people spend the night in the Capitol, and because of that rule, the protesters figured that out, and so they started spending the night in the Capitol. They completely took the place over, and it's a big Capitol. It's big. You know, we have all our legislative offices are there, plus the governor's office is inside that one single building, and the Attorney General. The Supreme Court is all in there, all our hearing rooms, everything is in there, all in one place, and it was completely taken over. They had tents, they had beds, they were cooking as if you were outside. They had medic stations, and they were there for weeks. So when we got to Thursday noon, we were pretty tired. I had had an interview with MSNBC where they took me outside to do this because the national TV crews were all set up across the way out on the square. And they came and they had 6 highway patrolmen. And I said, I don't need any bodyguards, you know. And he said, well, you will. And I said, no, really, nobody knows who I am. I'm brand new here. No one will know who I am. And they said, well, you will after that light goes on in the camera. So I went and did this interview, and we had throngs of people yelling behind me as I'm on this interview on national TV, right? And on the way over, the 6 guys walked behind me. They knew no one knew who I was, and that was fine. As soon as the interview was over, they made a little huddle around me with 6 people as if I was the president or something, and the reason was they'd seen what happens to everyone wearing a tie. Because if you wore a tie, you were one of the bad guys. The other side had long since switched to t-shirts. They wore the union t-shirt for either AFSCME or whatever the group was. So they put 6 guys around me, and people literally hurled themselves at those guys in order to try to get at me. They're pulling, they're throwing things. And I would never have believed it in Madison, Wisconsin, but this is what it had come to. You cannot control a mob once they've decided that you're going to try to take away some of their government. And so I got back in, we kept on going. When we went through all the way to 1 a.m. on Friday morning, we'd been 63 hours of nonstop debate, and we took that vote. And you know what? The senators had left the state. They left the state. We couldn't make any progress. They were supposed to take it up the next week, but they wouldn't do it. And so we had to do it all over again, a second time. But the point of that whole story is say that, you know, here's what happened. Here's what we learned from doing all this, is that you don't have to be afraid to do something big. And that it isn't going to be any harder to do something and tackle it really big. That's a lesson. Because there are a lot of people that have been there a long time, and they said, oh, I don't think we want to do that. I don't think we dare do that. I could never vote for that in my district. But I don't think I'd ever be reelected. You ever heard that? Maybe you conservative guys from a conservative district like out where you are, maybe you could do that, but I don't think I could ever do that, right? Okay, well, you know, there were so many of us, and we were elected. We had Tea Party members that got elected, and we had people that had knocked off longtime liberal incumbents, right, that got elected. And we didn't care. We didn't care what happened, to be honest with you. We just wanted to change the whole system while we were there. We didn't know how much time we have. Here's something you learn, and this has happened everywhere it's happened. It happened in Indiana, it has happened in Michigan, is that if you will actually stand up for conservative principles, there is a silent majority out there that comes out of the woodwork and says, I've been waiting for you. Where have you guys been? I couldn't tell the difference between the parties, but now I can. And they came out and they supported us. They not only supported Governor Walker, and you've all seen that, yeah, you can clap. You know, we had recall elections then. And that scared the daylights out of some people, but you know, in the end, guess what? We still had control. And they tried to recall Governor Walker, and you know what that did? It only made him stronger because he didn't back down an inch, and it brought people out of the grassroots and out of the woodwork that stood up and said, you know, I haven't really been that involved, I haven't been that interested, I couldn't really see why, because it was all just one big machine of government growing and growing and taking away my freedoms and taking away my liberties and taking away my tax dollars. But now here you are, and apparently you're willing to do something differently, and they supported us. And we came back, and we had bigger majorities. 2 years later, when we had our elections, we went from, you know, it takes 50 to have the majority in our assembly, and we had 57 when we passed that. 4 people voted against Act 10. And there's a lesson in that too. But we had 57, we came back the next time, we had 60, we came back this time, we have 63. The same thing's been happening over in our Senate. And I put it all on the fact that we had the courage and maybe the naivete, but we had the courage to just say, you know what, let's just do it. I'm not here because I want to be here a long time. I'm here because I want to change things. Tomorrow we're going to start it all over again, and I don't know what's going to happen. But you know what? We go into it now with a lot of certainty that the thing to do is to stand up for those same principles. That's what we know. If I go back to my story about the 4 people that voted no, that were in our caucus that voted no in the assembly. Now when you go and talk with them, 2 of them aren't there anymore, and I don't think it would have mattered, but there's 2 others that are. And both of them will tell you, you know what? It seemed like the right thing to do at the time, that I should vote no because I was afraid that my constituents, you know, would be hard on me. They all assumed that I voted for it, so I got all the flack anyway. And, right? So they all assumed, and in the end, I ended up defending it just as if I had voted for it. And so, I mean, I think this time it'll be a little bit different for us. Okay, so, I think one message is, develop your message. The message needs to be based not on numbers. Conservatives love numbers and we love history. Liberals don't care about history and they deal with emotion instead of numbers. So you've got to develop a message that's a freedom and liberty-based message. When you watch how we're messaging workplace freedom starting tomorrow, the fact that no one should be required to join an organization or pay dues in order to be employed somewhere, that's the way that message is going to be framed. It's going to be framed about liberty and freedom. It is not going to be framed about what economic benefits there are, or if there's different take-home pay, or what will the unemployment rate be, or anything like that. It's going to be a liberty and a freedom argument because we know that that's what works, that's what sells, that's what the broad section of our country still cares about and wants to hear about and wants to live. So we're not going to be talking so much about right to work. We're going to be talking about workplace freedom and the freedom to join an organization if you want to. Every single person that wants to be a member of a union can join the union, but if you don't want to, you shouldn't be forced to join that union. When, in the last couple of years, I made a list here of some things that we've done, and some of them didn't get a lot of attention. I think I already made the point that you've got, you know, by stepping out and showing leadership on issues, it helps develop your bench. Because these last couple of